Now, Reverend Ruth Barnhart, I think most of us know, is a staff minister at Santa Rosa Center for Spiritual Living and has been a regular guest. We feel more like part of our community, not a guest. And she is an avid hiker. She loves nature and the work of Ernest Holmes. So please help me in giving a warm welcome to our beloved Reverend.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So good to be here. I have a bio now. Oh my God, now I feel like myself. Oh yeah.
Now you know who you are.
Thank you for that bit of information, Sylvia. That really heartens me, that sense that it really is what we all want. I asked Danny to sing that song not only because it fills me up, I grew up with that song, but because our topic today is Imagine Peace. I was thinking of this story some of you may have heard before. I used to have this t-shirt that said Salam, Shalom, Peace. That's Arabic in Hebrew in English. And I was out on one of my trails years ago, and I was wearing this t-shirt, and someone actually stopped me. And this man says to me, "Do you really believe that?"
Good question.
It's a good question. And I went home and deeply thought about that, because that wasn't something, as someone who doesn't go into automatic optimism and positive thinking, I really had to think about that. And I thought, I don't really know that my human mind can wrap itself around the course of history in the Middle East, actually turning around and becoming a peaceful place. In fact, I had talked to a friend of mine who is a minister in our movement who's Jewish, and I said, what would it take for the end of war? And she said, for us to get our land. And I thought, we're in trouble. And so today, I'm wanting to talk about what it means to us to bring forth peace in our world. It's not a small thing. It's not a thing of just being happy and thinking, oh, it's going to work and everything's wonderful. My candidate's going to get elected and all the world's going to work out. In fact, our teaching doesn't really have anything to do with fixing the world. It has to do with shifting our own place of standing in ourselves. So even though my human mind might not be able to believe that the Middle East can become a peaceful place, what I get the opportunity to do in my practice is look at where I hang out in the thoughts and the feelings and the expressions that aren't peaceful. It really is what our teaching is about. Ernest Holmes said, we're not creating a world. We're not really here to get what we want. We are here shifting our own consciousness. I thought about that poem of Rumi's that he spoke of love. And he said, if I can find this, your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. And really, that's our work of being peace, is to look at it in us and really be honestly, exploring and inquiring, what do I hold on to? What am I holding on to beyond what I say I believe? What am I holding on to as what I think is my truth? Where am I still speaking of division? I've spoken of my experience on social media down in our community in Santa Rosa, which is a large community, and listening to the divisiveness of our people in the political arena right now. Sometimes blatantly hateful, sometimes just jokingly separate. You with me? You ever have those thoughts and feelings? Do you ever think about what's happening in politics or with a politician, no matter what side you are, and think of anything besides love and peace? Do you go there? Because certainly in our human minds, we do. I've been watching as someone who has grown up deep in the deep South during the civil rights movement, just the passage of laws in the movements and the changes true in the women's movement of a step forward and then a step back, or maybe a couple of steps back, and looking at really what we need in order to transform this world is not a new law or new regulation, but really a shift and an opening and awakening of consciousness. This teaching is all about that awakening. And that awakening only and always has to happen in us individually. So we can't sit in our nice little world. Somebody came up to me and asked me how things are in Santa Rosa. That might have been Sylvia. How are things in Santa Rosa? And I said, well, in my little world, they're good. But this teaching is not about our little world. I can't sit in a nice place and go, I've gotten to a nice place and my life is all happy and I've got my needs met. And I don't know what's happening with those people. That's not my problem. We used to have a question that used to get thrown around, and it was accepted in our movement early on, of what's in your consciousness, when people would sound untoward. Well, it's really a legitimate question in our movement, but the question always has to go to ourselves. What's in my consciousness that I have judgment about what's in your consciousness? Really, if we're going to know peace, if we're going to know working together in harmony, I have to stand in the place of you are not separate from me. I read this great line from Gabor Mate. I don't know how many of you know him. This man is phenomenal. He's a physician who is looking at our body, our psychology, and our culture as a system that works all together. Go figure, we kind of know this in our head. I'm reading the book, The Myth of Normal. And Gabor Mate says this: we are steeped in the normalized myth that we are merely individuals striving to attain private goals. Isn't that what you want? You want your own personal goals, accomplishments, stuff. We see from those eyes of separation. And yet our founder says we're not really individuals. We experience ourselves as separate bodies, but we really are a connected presence and energy of life. He calls it a swirl of etheric energy. That's what we are. Many of you've heard me tell the story of the homeless man who disappeared in front of me. If you haven't heard that, I'll explain that a little bit more. I was sitting in a restaurant down in Berkeley years ago, decades ago now, and this homeless man sat down beside me and he started acting sort of mentally not healthy, and it started making me nervous, but he was very close to me. And I started thinking, oh, what am I supposed to do? Should I feed him? I hope he doesn't start pointing at me and making those noises he's doing with everybody else, because I'm feeling a little vulnerable right now. And all these things are going on in my head, when all of a sudden I noticed something out of the corner of my eye, and I turned to look at him. And he had become this energy pattern of colored waves. And I heard this voice that said, you're made of the same stuff. It's interesting that with the first time I gave a talk and I was going to speak about oneness and tell that story, I got the concordance and I opened it up and I'm like, I don't know what I should look at in the concordance. What kind of word am I looking for to find a quote from Ernest Holmes? And I looked down at the page and it said, made of the same stuff. And sure enough, I looked it up, and that's where Ernest Holmes talked about the swirl of etheric energy. We are made of the same stuff. Now, Ernest Holmes says it, the mystics say it, right? But so do the scientists. We are not as solid as we appear. Einstein calls it an optical delusion. I love that quote, albeit a convincing one. It's an optical delusion that we are separate bodies, that really life is one thing happening. But when I thought of that story recently, because I got turned around when this talk title came up for me, because I realized they weren't talking about or asking us to speak about the oneness of life that we are. They were speaking about what's personal in me. And I, for the first time after decades, thought, oh, I'm that etheric stuff. I'm that swirl of energy that I saw. We are that. We hold ourselves as separate human beings because, yes, we appear to be that way. And yes, that's what we see. And we will always see separate because that's what the human mind does. But we come here to rest in a deeper place. That's what spiritual practice is, to come home to that deeper place that allows us to know something more, to maybe even feel something more. Ernest Holmes himself, the founder of our movement, says it's not enough to know the concepts. We want to seek and find spiritual experience of our wholeness. That's our invitation to practice, to stop and notice moment to moment right here. There is something breathing our breaths. Is that not true? And that something lives around us as the air that's breathing through us. Einstein, I love Einstein because he's a smart guy. Although we send out memes all the time, we slap his name on them, and he didn't say most of those things. But he did say that imagination is more important than knowledge. And he said that knowledge is limited. That's why. So I want to say to you, and I include myself in this, nothing that you think or you think you know is the absolute truth. It's always limited. I don't care how convinced you are or we are on this side of the political aisle or whatever side we're on. Our reality is just a tiny slice of what's really happening. Our thoughts are always limited because that's the nature of having a human brain. We're limited in our human form. And he says imagination encircles the world, but when I look at what's encircling the world, and I had a Vedantic teacher guide a meditation of consciousness, it's not just our human imagination, it's consciousness itself. We are consciousness. So I'll ask you, are you aware right now? Are you aware? Are you aware that you're aware? That sounds like an obscure question, but really to ask yourself inside, am I aware right now? The great teachers would say, you are that awareness. We are that consciousness, not the thing that we're conscious of. We keep identifying with the content of our consciousness. That's what we mean when we say judging by appearances. You are that body, you are that gender, you are that political affiliation, you are this thought and that way and that job. Tain't so. We're here to remember truly who and what we are and to touch that ground. I had the deep joy. I went to see a dear friend of mine up in Washington who moved away and abandoned me. I let him know he abandoned me 2 years ago. He's a really, really close heart, soul friend. And he moved to my favorite place in the country, Washington. So I'm up and visiting him. And he's like, can I say this on camera? Spitting distance from Canada. Here I am, spitting distance. So he's up in the very top of Washington and I am home. Just green and trees and mountains. It's like, oh, my home. And we were walking every day and just talking and walking. And I've known this man for years, and I've done services with him. He's a musician, singer, songwriter. And he said to me at sometime in our conversation, he goes, "But Ruth, I've never had that deep experience." I said, "What are you looking for?" And he starts talking about the God experience. And I said, "You're looking for fireworks. Are you looking for fireworks? Are you expecting some explosion to happen?" Because we have this idea of what it means to have God experience. We have an idea of what it means to be enlightened, to be awake. And I just stopped him, and we just stopped, and I stood in the trail with him, and I said, "Well, what are you experiencing right now?" And he talked about where he was, and I got him to just stop and put all his thoughts and stories about himself down. Who are you without your story right now? Just being here in this moment. No story about what's happening out in the world, in the past or the future. Just here. Who are you? What are you? And I asked him, what have you known? What is the highest experience you've had of what you call the divine? And he said, when we used to sing and pray together. And so I invited him to stop and feel that. What is the highest experience you've had? Stop and feel it. Just rest for a moment. I don't care if it's a tiny glimmer, or if it's an imagining or a wishing, a hoping. Just stop. Underneath the thoughts and the stories, and I want it to be different, or it should be, just stop right here. And I asked my dear friend, what are you feeling? And he said, I feel relaxed. I feel peace. Are you there? Can you feel that right now? And I said, is it inside your body or outside? And he said, inside. And I said, well, what's about the outside? And he just started crying. And he said, it's so expansive. We live in that sea of expansiveness. The way we live on this planet in the vastness of space. But we identify with this small little thing, and we identify the most. We can talk about all the positive things. We identify the most with our biggest problem. Don't we? The thing that's annoying us, that's what we identify. The biggest pain. I've talked about my arguing mind. You know, I grew up a revolutionary in the Deep South during the Civil Rights Movement. I came up by it, you know, of course, what else could I do? And I've been looking at, what is that part of me that's arguing about what's happening right now? Because my brain wants to find reason and wants to make sense of, and it wants to find a solution for. Give it up. Not going to happen. Find the peace underneath it and listen from there. That's spiritual practice. We're not denying the world. We're not pretending that there aren't things going on that are hurtful out there, that there are things to do. But we want to come from a deeper place. We want to come from peace. If we want peace in this world, we have to find peace in our own being. In Buddhism, they talk about finding refuge. For me, that's why we come to our centers. We may want this and that, and I'm having this hurt, and I need more of this, but we come here for our refuge. This is where we come to remember something bigger, to feel embraced in a greater love. And then to go out into our world from that place. That's spiritual practice. It's not a small thing. I was having a memory of, and I thought, I don't usually share this story because it seems so obscure. So it's hard to put to words that is beyond words. But I was sitting with a spiritual teacher that's called a master decades ago, and I followed him and I spent a lot of time with him. He was from India, and he would sit in front of us, and you could feel the shimmering of love in him, around him. And we had sat together as a group, and then he had done a talk, and he talked about the light that we are, and the love and the we are, and the oneness that we are. And then he said, I want to hear from those with their from those of you who have burning questions. And I'm like, I have a burning question. I was born with my burning question. I said, if we come from wholeness and we go back to wholeness, what is this? I'm not having a good time here. And this teacher looked at me, and I was sitting at his feet, and he looked at me. And I don't know what happened. I saw his mouth moving. I know he answered my question, but I went into that just empty, spacious. I mean, I can't even say words, peace or love. It was just beyond our human experience. I love that in the Bible, they talk about that peace beyond human understanding. Our founder talks about a oneness. He invites us to pray a oneness beyond human understanding. We are going beyond what we know. Not just imagining a world that works in peace, but dropping into that peace that is it's already right here. We just aren't listening to it. We're listening to the news. We're not listening to it. We're listening to this chatter and this argument inside about what is and what isn't. Don't. If just for a moment every day, you stop listening to it and start touching what's here when you stop hearing the chatter. It may still go on. It's always going to go on. We just stop attending to it. It's like sitting in front of a Stephen King movie, God forbid, sitting in front of a Stephen King movie and somebody calling you to dinner. The movie's going on, but you're no longer attached to it, so you're no longer bound by that fear. You with me? We're bound by our thoughts. We are not those thoughts. Beyond our human thinking, beyond our human feelings and perceptions, there is this field of wholeness and oneness, and it is peace. And so let's turn to that awareness right now. This thing called by many names that is truly beyond all naming, knowing. It simply is life. And it is fully present here. It is that is being, unfolding, breathing each breath. This day, the day of the autumn equinox is that day, that awareness that life is turning, moving brand new. Held in this flow of life that creates everything and everyone. No one is left out of this oneness. No one is outside of this one life, this one embrace, this one spacious being. It is never missing. It is never separate. It is the ground of being right here. A peace beyond human understanding, right here, always. And so I know this presence of life as the very life of my life. It is the stuff of which I am made, every cell, every breath, every function, every activity. It is in that inner stillness, and it is that is and acts through everything I do. And so I know it as the truth of each one here. It is the truth of all that we hold near and dear. It is the truth of everyone and everything in our world. For there is no other life. One breath, one life, one stuff, one intelligence holding and unfolding through this one universe, one. So I simply come home in conscious awareness of this one. No thought, no feeling, no experience can separate me or anyone from this that is the wholeness of being right here, not separate. And so I enter into this awareness. I surrender into this embrace of this one life. It is holding me. It is unfolding through me. It is the very life that we are right now. Individuated and together, it is life right here. And it is that is unfolding anew in this very moment, beyond all human ideas, beyond all that has gone before. It is unfolding. It is that guides the stars, spins the planet. It is that breathes the breath. It is always right here, our constant companion. And so I simply know this. I call this forth in this new conscious moment called prayer. And I let go into, surrender into that vastness. That one that is the source, the beer, the knower, the doer of all, I let go in sweet gratitude, and I let this be. And so it is. Amen. Amen.